I used to think that love was something you could hold in your hands, something tangible you could shape, mold, and sculpt to your liking. Maybe I was naive then, or maybe I just wanted to believe that my life with Rio was the storybook kind of perfect that everyone around us seemed to admire. I was the beautiful wife, the model of elegance and grace, and he was the sharp business tycoon, successful, commanding, and relentlessly driven. We made a perfect pair, or so it seemed. Tokyo was our playground. Glittering nights under the neon lights, expensive dinners at rooftop restaurants, endless business trips to exotic places. It was all wrapped in a pristine bow, and I wore that bow like a crown. I never questioned the life we built. At least, not until I met Mickey. I wasn't looking for something else. I wasn't looking for anyone to fill a gap in my life that I didn't even realize existed. But Mickey came into my world like a breath of fresh air. She was everything I wasn't: wild, unrestrained, free. It's funny how you don't notice the cracks in your own perfect life until someone else shows you what's missing. We met at a gala, one of those high-profile events Rio loved to drag me to. Everyone in the room seemed so eager to show off, talking numbers and names like they could get away with pretending to be perfect. Mickey stood out from the crowd like a flame in a sea of dullness. Her presence was magnetic, and I couldn't look away. We spoke for the first time over cocktails, and she smiled like she was in on a secret I hadn't been told. There was a rawness in her gaze, an energy that hummed in the air between us. By the end of the night, I found myself sneaking away from the crowd, sneaking into the small bubble of intimacy that only she and I shared. The conversation started off innocent enough, just banter about work, about Tokyo, about the absurdity of it all. But somewhere between her laugh and the way her fingers brushed mine, something changed in me. A spark, something I hadn't felt in so long, ignited. I didn't understand it at first, and I told myself I was being ridiculous. I was married. I was comfortable. Why would I need anything more? But there was this pull. And as the night ended and I slipped into the backseat of the car, I couldn't shake the thought of her, of how she made me feel more alive than I'd felt in years. Our first real meeting outside the party was a week later. I thought it would be a one-off, just a few drinks to satisfy the curiosity. But Mickey made everything feel effortless, like we were old friends even though we'd only just met. She made me laugh. She made me feel like I could be someone other than the perfect wife. In her presence, I wasn't EMI, the dutiful spouse with perfect manners. I was me, a woman who had desires, who had fantasies, who didn't always fit into the neat little box I'd been placed in. We spent more time together after that. I told myself it was harmless, that it wasn't anything serious. It was just a friendship, a bond, something I needed in my life to remind me that I wasn't just a reflection of Rio's world. But the more I saw Mickey, the more I wanted her, not just her body, but her spirit. There was something magnetic about her, something dangerous, something raw that Rio's carefully curated world could never give me. One night, after too many drinks and too many stolen glances, Mickey kissed me. It wasn't supposed to happen. I didn't plan it, didn't seek it. But when her lips met mine, it felt like the world had stopped for a moment. It wasn't the same as when Rio kissed me. Those kisses were routine, like brushing your teeth, something you do because it's expected, because it's part of the schedule. But Mickey's kiss was a jolt of electricity, a force of nature that made my pulse race and my skin burn. The guilt came later. But in the moment, there was only desire. The next few weeks felt like living in a dream I didn't want to wake from. I found myself sneaking away from my husband's side, lying to him about dinner meetings, about late nights at the office, when in reality I was with Mickey. Her hands, her body, the way she whispered my name. I was caught in a whirlwind, spinning out of control, but it felt so much better than the lifeless routine I'd built with Rio. But there was always that nagging feeling at the back of my mind. What would happen when the truth came out? Could I keep up the charade? And more than anything, did I even want to? 6 months passed before everything fell apart. By then, I couldn't even pretend that I was just having fun, that this was some temporary escape from my marriage. I was in deep. I was emotionally tangled in Mickey's world, and as much as I told myself I could walk away at any time, I knew I couldn't. Mickey had become a drug, and I was addicted. Rio's business trips became more frequent. His absences were like windows of opportunity, allowing me to slip further into this secret life. He was always gone, always working. I could live my double life without fear of being caught. But the lies, they started piling up. The tension in our marriage grew, too. I noticed it first in the little things, how Rio's eyes didn't linger on me the way they used to, how he started coming home late from his trips, distracted. I told myself I was being paranoid, but deep down, I knew something was changing. Maybe he knew. Maybe he didn't, but I knew I was slipping away from him. One night, after returning from another overseas trip, Rio acted differently. He was quieter than usual, his phone constantly buzzing. I tried to ignore it, but I couldn't. It felt like the calm before a storm. And then, 2 days later, everything crumbled. I didn't know he was coming home early. I didn't even think to check the flight schedule because I had gotten so comfortable with the rhythm of deception. Mickey and I had spent the night together in my bed, stupidly, carelessly. I had convinced myself that I could keep it up forever. But when the door opened, I didn't have time to react. Rio was standing there, his gaze locked onto me with a mixture of disbelief and fury. My heart sank. In that moment, I knew everything was over. I wanted to say something, anything. I wanted to explain, to tell him how I was sorry, how it had happened, how much I regretted it, but the words wouldn't come. The silence between us was suffocating. Mickey scrambled to cover herself, her face flushed with embarrassment, but Rio wasn't even looking at her anymore. His eyes were fixed on me, his wife, the woman he had trusted. His lips trembled as he whispered my name, his voice thick with hurt. And just like that, the life I had spent years building shattered. Rio left without another word, his footsteps echoing down the hallway as the door slammed behind him. The apartment felt empty in ways I couldn't describe. The quiet was deafening. I wanted to scream, to run after him, but I knew it was too late. The damage was done. Mickey left, too. I didn't stop her. What was left to say? I don't know how long I sat there in that empty apartment after Rio left. Time felt like it slowed to a crawl, each second stretching longer than the last. My mind was a storm of thoughts, racing 1 minute and completely blank the next. It was as if my body had frozen in place, unable to comprehend the magnitude of what had just happened. Mickey had slipped out quietly. I hadn't even heard her leave. Her departure was as silent as the wreckage left in her wake. The air was thick with an unspoken understanding between us. I couldn't look at her, and she couldn't look at me. The forbidden, passionate love we had shared for the past 6 months now felt like a crime, one I wasn't sure I could ever atone for. I grabbed my phone and dialed Rio's number without thinking. The ringtone seemed to stretch into eternity, and my hand shook with the anticipation of his voice. But it went to voicemail. I left a message, but I couldn't even form coherent words. I just muttered his name, Rio. I didn't mean for this to happen, I swear. The guilt crashed over me like a wave. I had been lying to him for months, living in a fantasy where nothing mattered but the moments I shared with Mickey. I had convinced myself that I was entitled to this secret, this escape. But now, faced with the reality of my actions, I could see nothing but destruction. The person I had betrayed wasn't just Rio. It was myself. I had no idea what Rio was feeling. Was he angry? Was he heartbroken? Did he hate me? The uncertainty gnawed at me. I needed answers. But I wasn't sure if I was ready for the truth. The days that followed were filled with the kind of silence that can only exist when something precious has been lost, when the space once occupied by love is hollow and empty, echoing with the pain of what's gone. Rio didn't come home that night. He didn't come home the next. I spent hours waiting, pacing the apartment, but he didn't call, didn't respond to my messages. He didn't even acknowledge my attempts to reach him. I knew I had to face him, to explain myself, but the thought of seeing him again, of facing his disappointment, was unbearable. So, I did what I do best. I buried myself in the day-to-day routines. I went to the office, met with clients, pretended like everything was fine. But the facade was fragile, and I could feel it cracking under the pressure. I couldn't focus on work. I couldn't focus on anything except the looming question, would he ever come back? I spent a night on the couch, staring at the phone, hoping for a message, a call. Nothing. The loneliness felt like a physical ache in my chest, and I couldn't escape it. There was no room to hide from the consequences of my choices. It wasn't until the third day that I received a text from Rio. I remember the moment vividly, sitting on the edge of the couch, my fingers trembling as I opened it. His message was simple, we need to talk. And there it was, the moment of truth, the moment I had been dreading. I didn't know what to expect, but I knew it would change everything. Rio came home that evening, his presence filling the space in a way that was both familiar and alien. He had always been a tall man, commanding in stature, but now he seemed smaller somehow, like someone who had been drained of all his strength. The sharp lines of his face were softer, but his eyes, they were cold. The warmth I had once found in those eyes had disappeared, replaced by something unreadable. "Who am I?" he said, his voice strained, as though he were forcing the words through clenched teeth. I stood up from the couch, my legs shaky, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't know what to say. How could I explain? Could I even explain it? "I know what you're going to say," he continued, his gaze fixed on me. "But I need to hear it from you. I need you to tell me why." His voice trembled ever so slightly on that last word, and I could see it, the crack in his armor. I had never seen Rio like this. He was always in control, always the one with the upper hand. But now, in front of me, he looked broken. The guilt twisted in my stomach. I had never wanted to hurt him. I hadn't meant to destroy everything we had. But how could I make him understand that? How could I explain the pull I had felt, the weakness I had allowed to take over? I don't know where to begin, I whispered, my throat tight.
I'm so sorry, Rio. I never meant for this to happen.
But somewhere along the way, I lost myself.
I got caught up in something I thought I needed. I thought I could have both worlds. But I can't.
He stared at me, his face unreadable, his lips pressed into a thin line. His eyes burned with a mixture of anger, sadness, and something else, disappointment.
It was the disappointment that hurt the most.
I thought you loved me, EMI, he said, his voice barely above a whisper.
I thought we had something real. But now I wonder if that was all just an illusion. Was I just a convenience to you?
Something to fill the spaces when you needed it.
I felt a lump form in my throat. No, it wasn't like that.
I didn't mean to hurt you. You didn't mean to? But you still did, he snapped, the harshness in his voice a stark contrast to the way he had always been with me. His calm, measured tone had always been the thing that balanced our marriage. But now, it was as though he had lost his grip on the very thing that had once defined him.
I don't know what to say, EMI. You've betrayed me in ways I never thought possible.
I don't know if I can forgive you for this.
And there it was. The truth I had been running from. The thing I had feared the most. I had lost him.
The days after that conversation were a blur. Rio didn't stay at the apartment. He moved out almost immediately, retreating to his family's house in the suburbs. The city, once full of life, felt suffocating now. Every street, every corner, every sound reminded me of what I had destroyed. I tried to reach out to him, to explain, to apologize, but his responses were cold and distant.
He didn't want to talk. He didn't want to hear it. And Mickey? She was gone.
I never heard from her again. I didn't blame her, though. She had been a part of the lie, yes, but the truth was, I had made the choice. I had let myself fall into something I shouldn't have.
And now, I was paying the price.
The next few weeks felt like a haze. I went through the motions. Work, dinner alone, late nights spent staring out the window, waiting for the answer that would never come.
I realized then that I had never truly known what I wanted. I had wanted excitement, something to feel alive again. But I didn't know how to balance that with the love I had once shared with Rio. And now, I had nothing.
It's been a month since that night, and I still don't have the answers I'm looking for.
Rio hasn't returned. He hasn't even called.
I've left him dozens of messages, sent him emails, tried everything, but he's gone silent. I've thought about Mickey often, about the wild passion we shared, the stolen moments. But now, with everything that's happened, I wonder if I was just chasing something that was never meant to last. I wonder if, in trying to find something more, I ended up losing everything that truly mattered.
I can't change what I did. I can't take it back. But I can try to rebuild from the rubble of my own mistakes.
Maybe, in time, Rio will come back. Maybe not. But for now, I'm left with nothing but the consequences of my own choices. And that, more than anything, is the hardest thing to live with. What did you think of this story? Let me know your thoughts about it in the comments, and thanks for listening.